All right, here come Jamie and Ann. Let's give them a hand.
This is a pie diagram that was given to me by my predecessor, which I've held on to because I think it really illustrates how important the Clerk of Superior Court's office is as it relates to judicial functions that occur in Orange County.
And so, Jamie said, we do things from A to Z, birth to death. And so he sent us this hub, this wheel. But fortunately, he also sent us a list. And the colors mean absolutely nothing except that I just thought I would get clever because I was on a conference call and board. And so I turned them into colors. Adoptions, bookkeeping and bonds, child support, civil and criminal court, decedents, estates and divorces, expunctions, that sounds really bad, executions, extension of time, foreclosures, forfeitures, guardianships, hearings, incompetencies, are you speaking of me? Interpreters, juvenile judgments, jury, keeper of the records. That's all I thought they did. And in some states, by the way, that is all they do. In the state of North Carolina, they do a lot more than this. Legitimations, I'm going to use that at dinner conversation tonight. I'm going to speak about legitimations. Monies, motor vehicle liens, name changes, orders, out-of-state subpoenas, partitions, petitions, queries for information, thank goodness, registration records, strikes, orders, and those acronyms. Traffic, victims restitution, writs of possession, Xerox, because you got to get an X in there, let's be clear, years allowance, and zero tolerance. So that is all. No matter where you are about what's coming, let us take a moment to say thanks to all the people here from the Clerk of the Court for all of that hard work. I think that's a lot of work. Jamie, explain this stuff. Now, he said he's going to start at A and end to Z, and I said, oh, I don't know if we'll get out of here alive. So they're taking a few topics that they think might be of interest. Ann, thank you.
So if you could back up one slide.
You bet.
And I'll retrieve that microphone if you don't.
Yes, I guess you will.
Thank you very much.
On the sheet that you have, the very first thing that is showing is the A, which we thought would be perfect for the adoptions, and that's a big part of what we do at the clerk's office. And Mr. Stanford is going to let you know how that works as we start the adoptions and the process that we go through to finish an adoption, and they're different.
That's true, and Ann works very closely with me as an assistant clerk. She really is my go-to person with adoption filings, and so she's as knowledgeable as I am about adoptions. It is one of the favorite things that we get to do in the clerk's office. A lot of what we deal with is not the most pleasant subject matter, and being able to be involved with adoptions really makes a big difference because it makes it's very important in most people's lives. Most of the time what we're dealing with are minors that are being adopted, and some unfortunately have not had an easy life up to the point that perhaps a foster parent or somebody petitions to file for the adoption of the child. And you might be interested to know that you can also adopt an adult in North Carolina. You can adopt anybody but your spouse. That's per statute. The adoption forms are actually Department of Health and Human Services forms. They can be a little bit confusing. They have forms for various types of adoptions, independent adoptions, agency placements, relative adoptions, step-parent adoptions. And just this morning I was involved with the filing of what's called a readoption, where the parents had actually adopted in India and wanted to quote-unquote domesticate or get a decree of adoption here in the United States for legal purposes. Apparently it's very important to do that. And anything you wanted to add that I've left out as far as adoptions are concerned?
Well, each adoption is different as far as forms go. There are some that you don't require as many forms for. For instance, the adult adoptions, you don't require as many forms for those. And then when you look at the DSS, or what we call, if there's a foster parent involved, those are quite lengthy because there's more they have to do. They have to go into the home. They have to do what we call a report to court. And the clerk authorizes them to do that with an order for report to court. So then that has to be done by DSS. And it's a process also of time. Some adoptions can take Up to 90 days is usually the longest.
That's set by statute, so not less than 91 days, although the clerk does have discretion to shorten that period for good cause shown. That's right out of the statute. And adult adoption is only 30 days.
Right. And then if you have a child who's being adopted and possibly as a step parent is adopting a child over the age of 12, that child has to consent, has to sign a consent. So they've picked, the legislature has picked the age of 12 or above for that consent to be signed. So.
Okay, the next thing I thought we would talk about is guardianships, and really if you look here on the PowerPoint screen, it's really guardianships and incompetencies. The way this proceeds is actually a petition for adjudication of incompetence is filed first. So in the petition, somebody's alleged to no longer be capable of handling their affairs. And so it's a bifurcated proceeding. You deal with the incompetency first. And again, this is a proceeding where, as in the adoptions, you actually are sitting as the Clerk of Superior Court as a judicial officer. You're making a judicial decision. Particularly important with the petition for adjudication of incompetence, because somebody is declared incompetent, all their legal rights, almost all their legal rights are going to be taken away from them and given to somebody else. Now, with incompetencies, I see both ends of the spectrum. I see it occurring with children or teenagers that are 17 and a half under North Carolina law. A petition can be filed, keeping in mind that under North Carolina law, all minors, by virtue of their age, are actually legally incompetent. I believe the legislature did it at 17 and a half, so if there's somebody that's going to have problems when they become of age and turn 18, that you can pretty seamlessly take care of that situation. You also oftentimes see this with children that are suffering from some sort of mental challenge, or autism is one that we frequently see. On the other end of the spectrum, unfortunately, with the graying of America, we also see older folks that are no longer able to take care of their affairs. In the minor setting, most of the time it's usually easy to pick a guardian once the child has been declared incompetent. Most of the time a parent is stepping up to the plate, which makes my life a whole lot easier and makes the decision as to who should be appointed the guardian much easier. In the adult situation, most of the time there's somebody stepping up to the plate, a child. But not always. The ones that really get nasty are the ones where mom may have some assets and you've got maybe 4 children that have been warring all their life. It's a very dysfunctional family. Everybody wants to step up to the plate to take care of mom now. Those are the tough ones. It's difficult to make decisions in those. Anything that you can think of that I've left out? Yes, sir.
Are questions appropriate during the
Sure,
presentation?
as long as they're just for your clarification and understanding.
Okay, well, I have 2 questions. One is who actually petitions? Is that generally attorneys that do that, or can citizens petition? And 2, when you are making it, when the clerk or the clerk of court makes a decision regarding guardianship, is that something the clerk does, or does that go to some other entity for that decision?
No, it's in the original jurisdiction of the clerk. So to answer the second question first, it's before the Clerk of Superior Court. Now, and I have 7 assistant clerks. An assistant clerk can do anything that the elected clerk can do, so an assistant clerk could hear it. That's routinely done in some of the larger counties. In Orange County, I do all the guardianships. Now, in terms of who petitions, by statute, it's any interested party can petition for an adjudication of incompetence, which means not oftentimes, but sometimes it'll be the Orange County Department of Social Services. Those are usually pretty sad situations because you don't have anybody that's going to step up, and I probably will end up appointing the Orange County Department of Social Services as the guardian to take care of this individual.
Thank you.
Thank you. When do you get involved with the judge? Where does a judge fit into these? Both the incompetence and the adoptions.
Well, the only time a judge, it's original jurisdiction with the Clerk of Superior Court, so both of those proceedings would start before the Clerk of Superior Court. The only time that a judge might get involved is if someone appealed a decision of the Clerk of Superior Court. And typically, in adoptions, because it's considered family law, it would be appealed to the district court, so a district court judge would rule on that. If it were anything other than an adoption, for the most part, it would go to Superior Court. And depending on the type of proceeding, either the Superior Court or the District Court does a review of what the clerk did. So it's very important to have an order entered that has findings of fact and conclusions of law and an order, because the court there is simply doing a review of what the clerk did. So the Superior Court or the District Court is acting as an appellate court. If it's a special proceeding and you appeal from the clerk's decision and it goes to Superior Court, you start over. So it's a trial de novo.
Thank you.
Along those lines, the appeal could possibly come from a biological parent. So you have a couple and the father may want to adopt his wife's child. And the biological parent, father or mother, who is out of the picture for whatever reason, doesn't want that to happen. So they can answer the petition. They have to let them know that they're going to adopt the child. The petitioner has to let them know, send them a notice that this is going to happen, and then they have the right to answer and say either that's fine or not answer at all, which would that be the affirmation that they're okay with it. Or they can write back and say, I don't like this at all. I want a hearing before somebody, and we have one like that right now. And so they will come to the next hearings, and if it doesn't go their way, that's when the appeal comes in. They could possibly appeal to the judge.
And the child has to be how old in order to participate?
To sign a consent saying that they do wish to be adopted, the age is 12 or over. And a lot of them are infants, tiny children, so that's not applicable for them, but it's 12 and over.
Those are really the topics that I sort of wanted to cover in depth. So, adoption's kind of, if it's a child, we're talking about the beginning of life. If we're talking about incompetency and guardianships, now we've gotten on up in our years, potentially, unless, of course, it's a minor. The last thing I wanted to talk about a little bit was the decedent's estates.
We have a question here.
Yes.
I can't resist asking what an expunction and an execution might be. That sounds dire.
Pretty bad.
It's not as bad as you might imagine.
No.
Are we expunged today?
No.
Expunctions is actually if a criminal charge is disposed of in a fashion that allows it to be essentially erased or removed from your criminal record. There's a process by which you go through. It's complicated and it's involved because you have to first get a judge to sign off on the petition. It goes to the SBI, it then goes to the Administrative Office of the Courts, which is the supports branch for the court system in North Carolina. And once it gets back from the SBI that shows, do they have any other criminal record? It goes back to the judge. Judge hears the petition. If the judge thinks it's allowed, they sign off on the order. And once again, it goes back out to the SBI and to the Administrative Office of the Courts. And of course, what I do in Orange County is I remove it from the electronic record that we have. And if we still have the paper record, the original charge, that gets destroyed, that gets shredded. So that's an expunction. An execution actually has to do with a civil judgment. If you're trying to collect on a civil judgment, a writ of execution is issued by the clerk's office to, usually to the Orange County Sheriff's Office, although it could be another county sheriff's office if the judgment has been transcribed to the other county. And the sheriff actually literally goes out and tries to collect money. And if they can't collect money, they might be able to seize a car and sell it. Or if there's real property involved, they might be able to seize the real property and sell it to try to satisfy the judgment. That's what execution is about.
Thank you. I'm reassured.
And on the expunction, something interesting about expunctions is once it's finished and it's gone, we have had young people who may have had a charge and now they're going to law school and they really want that to be clean and clear, and that happens a lot, no problem. Then they'll call back and say, well, somebody wants to get a record. No, there's no record. It literally is gone. So but we did have one time, he said, no, I need something showing that it's gone. It's gone. I don't know what else to tell you, it's gone. We can't even print anything out. So it's really literally gone, which is great. That's what you wanted.
Well, and again, that's pursuant to the statute, and the expunction laws have actually increased in terms of the dispositions that now qualify for this removal from your record, which has created, quite a bit of additional work in the clerk's office. We spend a lot of time dealing with expunctions, and it's not a very quick process. As I described, it goes out, comes back, goes out again. before it comes back. Yes, sir.
So I have a friend who was arrested as a Moral Monday protester 5 years ago. Has his record been expunged?
I would have to check our database to see if it is, but it was, what was the disposition of the case, do you recall?
I remember, if memory serves, that person told me that it was he paid the $180 court fee, and I think he was told it was going to go away.
We'd have to look.
Okay. I'll ask him to come check it.
And again, it depends on exactly the disposition of the case. It has a great deal to do whether or not it qualifies for expungement, because not every conviction will qualify.
So I want to take a step back because, like most of us maybe, I was totally unaware of how complex this job really is. So my question is there an official credentialing that's required for clerk of court? Is official experience that you need to have?
To my knowledge, the only qualifications is that you're 18 years of age or older. I'm not positive about that. I clearly am much older than 18, so it's not one that I needed to check into. And you have to be a resident of the county in which you would be the clerk of Superior Court.
But you don't have to be an attorney.
You do not. Now, I happen to be an attorney. I have a law degree here from UNC. It helps me tremendously in the day-to-day functions of my office, particularly in those judicial functions. But it is not a requirement. Now, if you're a judge in North Carolina, you would have to have a law degree, but a clerk of Superior Court is not required to. Of the 100 clerks, my 99 fellow clerks, I think about 30 of them do have law degrees, 70 of them do not. That's a rough estimate. When I first came on board, it was more like 7 had law degrees and 93 did not. So, yes.
If somebody has paid their debts to society and wants
Let's be sure that everybody can hear.
I have a loud voice. If somebody has paid their debt to society and wants to vote again, do they have to go through your office to get some sort of certification to let the Board of Elections know?
They do not. Under North Carolina law, and this is a relatively recent change, if you've done your time and you're off parole and you completely paid your debt, then your citizenship rights are automatically restored. And so you don't have to file anything with us. Now, if you're out of state and you move into the state and you then get your citizenship rights restored, you can file in the clerk's office a certificate to that effect.
Are the documents that you file, keeper of the record, are they all public information?
Most of them, about 85%, 90%. Involuntary commitments, not public record. Involuntary commitments, if somebody's been committed to, usually through the emergency room at UNC hospitals, those records are not a public record, they're confidential. And if it's a record that involves a juvenile, so abuse, neglect, dependency, or juvenile delinquency, not a public record. Interestingly enough, adoptions are actually not a public record except to the extent there's a decree of adoption. That is a public record. But everything else that we collect in the process of an adoption proceeding gets packaged up and sent to Raleigh and is placed under lock and key over at the Department of Health and Human Services in their adoption services. It's not a public record except for that decree.
And how far back are those records at some point declared not of interest anymore or something?
For the most part, we scan them all before we destroy the paper record.
So how far back do they go? The 1800s?
For instance, I
or-
think now, the state archives has a lot of records that we turned over to them, the old judgment docket books and so forth, and old wills and things. But we have records back, for instance, in the Estates Division, I think we go back to 1968, which is what they have. That's when court reform occurred and the Superior Court and the District Court was created. It used to be sort of a hodgepodge of courts back then. You had a municipal court here in Chapel Hill, and it was only dealing with Chapel Hill cases, Chapel Hill and Carver cases. And so around 68, 69, the legislature modified that, fixed that.
And is there a charge is there a payment that people have to give to you to get a record?
Yes, and it depends on what kind of record. For instance, if you were to come to my office and ask for a criminal record check, The cost is $25, that's set by the legislature.
It is.
And unfortunately, we get some feedback from that, some negative feedback, because oftentimes there is no criminal record, and that's what we put down on a single piece of paper is there is no criminal record. But nevertheless, the legislature says you have to collect $25, we do. But now, if you're talking about copies and things like that, there are fees associated with that too. Quite frankly, it's pretty exorbitant. We charge $2 for the first page of each document and 25 cents for each additional page of each document. If you start over at a new document, you start it back over at $2. Again, set by the legislature.
So you're sort of income generating then?
Well, for the folks in Raleigh, yeah, I think you could argue that. Now, understand from the clerk's perspective,
Thank you.
you know, we rolled through in 1 7-month period of time, we rolled $6.6 million through the clerk's office. How much did it stay with the clerk's office? Not a penny. We have no budget. I have no budget. If I want to go to the post office and buy a roll of stamps, I have to go to the administrative office of the courts and ask them if they will reimburse me for the cost of those stamps. So I'm dependent on the administrative office of the courts. And again, that's the state level support staff for all the clerk's offices, quite frankly, for all the judicial officials, and from the Chief Justice of the North Carolina Supreme Court down to the magistrate. And part of the problems that we're having in the judicial system, and this is nothing new, but the budget, the entire state budget for the entire judicial branch, 1/3 of our government is, that's it. That's what we exist on.
One of the things that is very interesting to a lot of people is, how did I get on that jury? What happened? Oh no. So I also am in charge of handling the jury and all that implies. Also work with the grand jury. They are picked twice a year. 9 roll off and 9 new ones come on. And they serve once a month for 12 months. And if you're lucky enough to get on that, you're not feeling very lucky. However, that's private and secret, and they meet in secret and do indictments. They have deputies, officers, highway patrolmen that come in and give their testimony to the grand jury in secret, and they do indictments, or they don't do indictments. So they're the ones that handle that once a month. They come from the regular jury pool, and we pick those twice a month. When I send out the summons, I don't say, you're coming for grand jury, because it's going to be a surprise. So when they come, we say, it's grand jury. And then they're, oh, it's not funny. But I've been there, because I have been one that came for jury duty and thought it was just regular jury duty. And a lot of people were getting excused. There was a woman about to have a baby, and of course, she got to go. And a fella in camouflage, he was going out to overseas, he got to go. I'm thinking, this is getting really small here. There's not very many people left. And then finally the judge says, okay, now we will pick for the grand jury. And I knew exactly what that meant. And I thought, I'm going to get picked on this grand jury. But there were 3 of us left. So I dodged that one. But the other jury is picked from voter registration in Orange County and driver's license. Sometimes I'm wondering about tax records. No tax records.
No.
But what I get are people that say, I haven't lived in Orange County for 10 years. Why did I get this? Did you change your voter registration? That's usually it. And they go, no, that's it. Or it's usually a college student that never changed their driver's license address. So that's what it is a lot of times. And the biennium comes up, and we pull, you can best talk about that part, but that's where we get the names. We get a lot of names. And we have a program, Service Commander, that is wonderful. And I tell it I need a jury for May 16th, and I hit a button. There's all the names, and I tell it how many names I want. And it's all random, and they pull from those 20-some thousand names that are in a pot sitting over here. They pull from those. So that's how it happens.
And what Ann's making reference to is the master jury list, which is another responsibility of the Clerk of Superior Court's office. We have a jury commission. I appoint 1 commissioner, the senior resident Superior Court judge appoints 1 commissioner, and the county commissioners appoint 1 commissioner. They basically meet once every 2 years, and we put together the master jury list totally at random, as indicated from DMV records and from voter registration records, and it's totally random. My neat story about jury services that I actually sent out a jury summons to myself. I have it in my office up on the wall, and I did appear, and I was ready to go forward and serve as a juror if they put me in the box. And as it turns out, that particular veneer of jurors was not needed. I think the case settled on the courthouse steps, and so I didn't actually have to serve. It's funny that happened.
You should try it.
So,
Oh, I think we have a question here.
Oh,
Is
sure.
that correct?
So just for completeness, though, comments on legitimations, and then on strike orders, FTAs, and OFAs.
Yeah.
So,
Legitimations first.
What is that, actually?
legitimation is a child born out of wedlock. And so for the mom, it's the legitimate child of the mother, always. But it's not necessarily of the father. And so if the biological father wishes to legitimate the child and make the child his legal child, they go through a legitimation proceeding, and that's before the clerk of superior court. Typically, it goes forward with the dad would be the petitioner, and he will name as a respondent the child and the wife. And if the wife was married at the time that the child was conceived, you have to name the husband as well. And then you go forward with sufficient evidence to show that in fact the petitioner is in fact the biological father, enter an order to that effect, send a copy of the order to Vital Records in Raleigh, and the birth certificate is amended. That's legitimation. And forgive me, the second question was?
On the next page.
Oh, strike orders. This is relatively new. I'm happy to be involved with the strike orders. The FTA stands for failure to appear. The OFA stands for orders for arrest. Most of the time this is happening when somebody's missed a court date. At one time, the decision had been made that we simply were not going to do strike orders. Strike orders are, I missed my court date, an order for arrest has been issued or failure to appear has been registered because I didn't answer the docket on that particular day. And at one time, the decision had been made to simply say to those folks, you're going to have to come in, turn yourself in, go be processed through the magistrate, and quite frankly, go to jail, unless, of course, you could post the bond. We initiated a program using the pretrial release folks that the Orange County Commissioners were kind enough to fund. And so myself, one of my assistant clerks, not Ann, and a gentleman named Ted Dorsey, every Thursday, we have a strike order hearing where we go through and ask these folks, tell us why you didn't make it to court. Was there an emergency? Was there a medical problem? What's the issue? We have some guidelines that we can go through and ask the courts to recall those orders for arrest and simply give them new court dates. Now, when we do that, we typically are, the reason I have one of my assistant clerks in there is that she's on the computer and she's looking through other counties and looking through DMV information to make sure before we let that individual go, that they know all other court dates that they might have, whether it be in Orange County or in another county. And to the extent their problem is something related to their driver's license, perhaps it's been revoked, we can tell them where they need to go to try to fix that issue so that maybe they can go then to DMV and get their license restored. So it works really well. It takes us a couple hours each Thursday morning, but it's taken a lot of the burden off the district court judges because for the most part, unless we get one where a defendant's maybe missed 4 or 5 times or it's a probation violation and there's something very odd that we don't feel comfortable in our setting dealing with, it would go before a district court judge. Otherwise, we simply ask the court to take our rationale for striking the order for arrest at face value, which they typically do, and we just give them a new court date. They don't have to go to court. They don't have to go to jail or at least be processed by a magistrate.
One of the things on here that takes up a lot of our time once a week is traffic court. And typically, officers, highway patrol, deputy sheriffs, Chapel Hill Police, Carrboro, they are given tickets and they're told there are certain days of the month that they can put on the ticket because that's when they'll have to report to court for that ticket. So in Hillsborough, the Wednesdays, every Wednesday except the third Wednesday, we have a courtroom full of people, and we call it Traffic People Day. So it's those people come, not attorneys, it's the people who come in and talk to the DA about that ticket. We get them in the court. A lot of counties do this different. They do it alphabetically and they call a docket. Well, Mr. Stanford said, that doesn't work if it's 3 o'clock and you're to the M's. Well, you're gonna have to come back tomorrow. And in fact, in the larger counties, they have to do that because they have so many people. So we do it first come, first serve. And it has been the best thing for us we've ever done, I think. And I work in that court on Wednesdays. Miranda has worked in that court. We have 2 clerks up front that have the docket, and they have all of the shucks, which are also the tickets. We call them shucks. They're in envelopes, and they're by number. The docket has their last name and the ticket number. So as the people come in, we thread them through up to the front to check in, and they're going to have a seat in the order in which they came in. And the girls are asking for their last name, and then she gives her the ticket number. We pull the ticket. Well, around 8:30, we have a group of district attorneys that come in, assistant district attorneys that come in and man a table. And at times we've had maybe 6 to 7, which is great. And they come in, say a few words. Mr. Stanford gives an information about what's going to happen, because a lot of these people have never been to court before. Some of them, frankly, are terrified of what's going to happen. But we give them the information, and it's that to me is the most important part, because he says, okay, don't worry, this is how it's going to work. So he gives them an introduction. He says, you're here in the order you got here. You're going to come up and speak to a DA. Everybody speaks to the DA, because they'll come in the door and you're just trying to seat them and get them checked in, and they'll go, I need to speak to the DA. Everybody speaks to the DA, and they're like, oh, great, okay. So once they sit down, we're in the mural courtroom. We call it the mural courtroom because there are murals, beautiful murals all over the wall. It's one of our bigger courtrooms. And everybody's seated, and when the DAs get there, they start that first person. And then another DA will call the next one. So it runs really well, like a well-oiled machine. Every now and then we'll get a little bit of a hiccup, but very rarely. And that's usually when the person isn't on the docket. They check in and they're not there. They probably didn't get the right date, is usually what happens. But sometimes the DA works with them and says, this is what we're going to do. You got your registration, you went and got it fixed, you're free to go, you comply, see ya. And then somebody else will come in that was doing quite a little bit over the speed limit. They probably are going to have to talk to a judge. We have a judge sitting in another courtroom waiting, and we have bailiffs taking those tickets up there for those people. And by the time they get up there and the judge is on the bench, the judge hears those. So those are, not everybody goes up there. Then if we have driving school representatives available to just give information about different driving schools that are offered. You have online driving schools. You have some you can go to in person. We even have some that you go and actually drive in conditions. They put water on the parking lot, and they teach them how to drive aggressively or defensively. Not aggressively, defensively. I'm thinking of my son. I'm sorry. Rewind. Well, he did build the judicial wing. He built the judicial wing, the new wing, with his tickets. But anyway, now he's paying his own insurance and his car payment. He's never had another ticket. What is that? But the third Wednesday of the month is Attorney Day, attorney disposition. And all the people who got an attorney for their ticket, that attorney shows up. No people, just the attorney. And they sit there relaxed and very, very comfortable with the DA, and they talk about it. And it gets worked out because they paid for an attorney to do it. That's their day to come for their client. So that's the third Wednesday. If we have 5 Wednesdays in a month, we skip the last Wednesday. So it's the first, second, and fourth Wednesday of every month is traffic day. So if you ever drive by the Hillsborough Courthouse on a Wednesday, early in the morning, you're going to see a line down the sidewalk. But it really works. We get them in really quickly.
Well, let's correct that. So my idea, we did this, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago. What we were doing is having the traffic days, but we had the DAs on the ground floor of the new courthouse. And that's when the line went out the door and down into the parking lot and down behind the sheriff's office. And I walked upstairs and saw one judge in the mural courtroom with maybe one DA up there, and I thought, this is backwards. So what I did was convince the chief district court judge to reverse it. We put all the people in the mural courtroom. They have access to a restroom. They have access to a water fountain. If it's hot outside, they can get cool. If it's cold outside, they can get warm. And then we process them through. So if you come through on Wednesday at the Orange County Courthouse, if it's after 8 o'clock, you're not going to see a line out the door.
So I've just learned what I paid my attorney for to get me out of the
Yes,
apartment.
yes, yes.
That's very good. We've got about 5 more minutes for our educational portion of this. Questions?
You started to speak about decedents estates.
Can you start that again?
I did, and I was going to go right back to that with your permission.
Please.
So we had done the adoptions, which is sort of the minor, if it's a minor child involved, at the beginning of life. Then we talked about incompetencies and guardianships. You're getting up in years, but you're no longer able to deal with things. And then unfortunately for all of us, at some point there's going to be a decedent's estate. I don't think anybody's figured out a way around that. Decedent's estate, I'm the ex officio judge of probate in decedent's estate. And so I ride shotgun on every estate that's administered in Orange County. And I don't actually literally do the estate administration itself. I just supervise the people that have been named. If there's a will, an executrix or an executor. If there is no will, then it would be an administrator, and make sure that they administer the estate the way the law requires that it be administered. Does that answer your question? It's involved, and it's a lot of what we do, and it's extremely important.
So you're saying that anyone who passes away is a resident of Orange County, this process needs to be undertaken?
That's correct. Assuming that there's an estate to be administered. You know, unfortunately, there are people that when they pass away, they don't have anything.
Okay.
And if they don't have anything, there's not an estate, and so there's no administration necessary.
Okay.
So not everyone, no. And, you know, typically, it is an Orange County resident. Each clerk's office has an estates division. Our estates division is actually located sort of removed from the rest of the clerk's office. We did that intentionally, quite frankly, because of the subject matter that's involved. These people are hurt. You know, they've lost a loved one, and so we try to keep them out of the normal hubbub of the main part of the clerk's office. The other issue is that, quite frankly, they're going to be talking with our clerks, my clerks, in the estates division about some fairly confidential information, financial information. You know, what did mom have in the bank when she passed away? Well, just another reason to keep that removed. We've got a great estates division. I will tell you overall, we've actually got a really good clerk's office. I have assembled a really good team.
Are you the guy who has my will on file at the county?
If it's in Orange County, yes, ma'am. We are required by statute to maintain a will depository, and so we have it alphabetically over in the clerk's office under lock and key.
How far do those records go back for marriages, divorces, births, deaths in this county or any other?
Well, I think that we can go back to probably the early 70s. Now, are they physically present in the clerk's office? No, thankfully, because we wouldn't have any room to put people, because it's a lot. But everything that we have, we scan before it's destroyed, and so we can get it off of either microscan or microfilm. Part of the issue with microfilm is that it doesn't last forever, and it wasn't really great quality way back when, but we maintain a lot. And again, a lot of what we have we turned over to the state archives, and so if we don't have it, hopefully you can get it from them. They've got a really good system over there.
And also the marriage license, death certificates, they're at the Register of Deeds. We get a lot of calls. I got 3 Friday. Marriage licenses, divorces, death certificates are at the Register of Deeds. And we have that number and we give it to them so they can call over there. And talking about the scanning, Ms. Bruner, she is the Deputy Clerk for Civil Superior. She also does all of our micro scanning, puts it on discs, and she handles that. And it's a massive amount of work, but she manages to keep it up. And it's for everything, Civil Superior, criminal, criminal superior, small claims, M-files, registrations, everything. She does it all. Estates, yeah.
Does the Register of Deeds report into you?
No. Register of Deeds is a county office, I'm a state office. We do work together because a lot of the land records that the Register of Deeds office have are affected by the estates division, people's will and people passing away by intestacy.
Would you comment on the title of your office? Why is it clerk? You were certainly way beyond what is usually the clerk.
Well, I agree with that statement. It actually is a constitutional office. It's set out in the North Carolina Constitution, which is the reason it's named what it is. I believe back then there was only a superior court, legislature created the district court, they simply didn't change the name, they just gave me the responsibility to deal with the district court as well. So I serve the same function in Superior Court and District Court. I mean, if there's a courtroom in Orange County that's taking place, I'm involved.
No, I meant clerk.
I don't, again, it's in the Constitution, that's what they pick. Now, as was pointed out, I think by Bailey early on, the clerk's office in North Carolina is different from the other 49 states. Most states, if not all the other states, have a judge of probate that's going to deal with decedents of states and guardianships and incompetencies. And then they can have a clerk of court who does the administrative aspect of what I do. In the clerk's office here in North Carolina, I get them both. It makes it a very, very important office in terms of the citizens of Orange County,
Yes, sir.
clearly. Yes, sir.
I have two questions. One, show my ignorance, what if you have a will drawn up by an attorney, does that automatically get filed with the clerk of court, so you would have a copy of whatever that will is?
No, it does not. Only if you choose the option to deposit it with the clerk's office. And let's talk about two different things. What I have are will depositories. That's for wills that have yet to be probated. Those folks are still with us. Then you make application at the appropriate time to have a will admitted to probate. That would be, of course, after somebody's passed away.
My next question, would you make some comments or explanations about your staff, the size of it, and how those people are selected?
Sure. They're hired, they serve at the pleasure of the clerk, and that's directly out of the statute. So I hire them, I fire them. There are 26 in my office, not including myself, 7 assistant clerks like Ann Austin, and 19 deputy clerks like Ms. Bruno. An assistant clerk, as I said before, can do anything the elected clerk can do. A deputy clerk basically serves a ministerial role, so they can't enter judgments, they can't do motions or grant motions for extension of time, they can't serve in any sort of judicial role. The number of clerks that I have is unfortunately for me determined by the administrative office of the courts. Again, the decision is made at the state level. A lot of the decisions and the technology and so forth that we have to deal with in the clerk's office is made by the administrative office of the courts. It can be frustrating.
So who pays you all?
State of North Carolina.
All 26 people?
We are all state employees, that's correct.
Okay. We have time for one final question in the education portion, and then we'll go.
I'm just curious why in North Carolina this is an elected position, given the expertise that's required rather than a merit hire position.
I really don't have a good answer for that other than to point once again to the Constitution of North Carolina. That's what determined that it would be an elected position. It's also, of course, a partisan position. So Mr. Kleinsman and I are both running on a Democratic ticket, which means that this May primary is very crucial. But that's about the best answer I can give you.
All right, we're going to wrap up the education portion of just the strict education portion of the program. We're going to learn, I learned some things here. Who besides me learned some things you didn't know about this? This is pretty astonishing, isn't it? So let's thank both Jamie and Ann